Welcome to Arise YouTube, where we exist so that way you can experience God. If you haven't already done so, make sure to click that subscribe button so that way you can keep up with our weekly sermons. With that being said, we pray that this sermon blesses you and encourages you to take one more step closer to Jesus. Enjoy.
Arise Church, let's go back to September 29th, 2006. That's when Petty Officer Michael Mansour is a United States Navy SEAL operating in Ramadi, Iraq. Mansour is standing on a roof in Ramadi, and he's standing in front of a doorway to this roof. He has two Navy SEAL teammates lying in the sniper-prone position at his feet. They've already taken AK-47 fire and a rocket-propelled grenade, but they're not exactly sure where the enemy is. There's a bit of a lull in the fighting. Insurgents have blocked off the streets in Ramadi, and there's someone on the loudspeaker in the town mosque yelling, "Kill the Americans!" As Mansour and his team are looking for the next attack, an insurgent from an unknown location throws a grenade up on the roof. It hits Mansour in the chest, and it falls to his feet. Due to the length of the throw, there's no opportunity to pick it up and throw it back. He has only a split second to make a decision. He can leap through the doorway behind him and save himself, but if he does, his two teammates lying at his feet will surely die. Mansour yells, "Grenade!" But instead of jumping backward to save himself, he jumps forward, chest first, onto the grenade. It detonates. 30 minutes later, 25-year-old Michael Mansour is dead. His two teammates lying on the roof receive only minor injuries because Mansour's body muffled the blast. One of the survivors said at Mansour's funeral, "Mikey looked death in the face that day and said, 'You will not take my friends, I will go in their stead.'" I've never seen a United States president cry until April of 2008. That's when President George W. Bush invited Mansour's parents into the East Room of the White House to give them their son's Medal of Honor posthumously. The president couldn't even get through the citation without breaking down. Since then, Mansour's high school in Garden Grove, California, built a new stadium. They named it Michael A. Mansour Memorial Stadium. The golden trident insignia that the SEALs wear dominates the 50-yard line. January 2019, North Island, California, just outside of San Diego, the United States Navy commissioned the USS Michael Mansour, the newest guided missile destroyer in the fleet, Zumwalt class. This is Mansour's mother, Sally, being escorted onto the ship, named in honor of her fallen son. Now, why did they do this? Because Michael Mansour literally sacrificed himself to save his friends. There's no greater love than to sacrifice yourself to save your friends, said Jesus of Nazareth before he went to the cross. Michael Mansour sacrificed himself to save his friends. The question is, would anyone sacrifice himself to save you? And the answer is, someone already has. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. But in today's culture, a lot of people don't think the story's true. They think it's invented. After all, it was written down by religious people. We know religious people tend to embellish things. They don't necessarily tell the truth. And it's got miracles in it. I mean, it's got a resurrection. How many people in this room have ever seen someone rise from the dead after being dead for at least 36 hours? Yeah, none of us. Why? Because it doesn't happen, that's why. And for Christianity to be true, You have to believe in something none of us have ever seen. How rational is that? Well, I actually think it's easy to show that Christianity is true. You only need to answer 4 questions. In other words, if you investigate these 4 questions, I think you'll realize that the answer to these 4 questions is yes. And if the answer to these 4 questions is yes, then Christianity is true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Music, isn't it? Yep. That's actually from our TV show, which is on every Wednesday nights on DirecTV channel 378. How many people here have DirecTV? DirecTV. Come on, friends don't let friends watch cable. All right, how many people have Roku? Anyone have Roku? Oh, good. All right. Well, look for NRB on Roku, because that's the station it's on, Wednesday nights at 9. Now, if you don't have DirecTV and you don't have Roku, it's on this new technology sweeping the Tampa area right now. It's called the internet. Have you guys heard of this? Okay, yeah, it's on our website, crossexamine.org, right there at that time. We're also on radio every Saturday mornings. I don't know if it's on in the Tampa area or not, but that's okay. It's podcasted. It's called the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist podcast. And you can get it wherever you get podcasts. And what we do is we present evidence for Christianity, and we cross-examine ideas against it. Now, why are these the 4 questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. And by the way, this is going to serve as our outline for the entire weekend. Tonight and tomorrow, we're going to go through these 4 questions. Tonight, we're going to cover the first question, does truth exist? Why is that important? Because you hear people saying there's no truth, you got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative. Look, if there's no truth, then quite obviously Christianity can't be true. Of course, if there's no truth, atheism can't be true either, right? I mean, look, if there was no truth, would you ever go to school? Would you ever go to church? Would you ever read a book? Of course not. In fact, if there was no truth, you could never say somebody else was lying, right? Because truth is necessary to know what a lie is. You got to know what the truth is to say, hey man, you're lying. Of course there's truth, but a lot of people deny it, so we're going to talk about it tonight. Next question, does God exist? Obviously Christianity can't be true if there's no God, but tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., right, Pastor Brent? At 9 a.m., I hope to show you that God really does exist. In fact, we're going to look at 3 arguments for God. These arguments are taught in the Bible, but you don't need the Bible to know them. In fact, you can establish that God exists without any reference to any Bible or scripture or any religious writing. You can know God exists, and we'll show you how to do that tomorrow morning. The third question is, are miracles possible? A lot of people don't believe in miracles. They've never seen a miracle. Miracles don't seem to happen. I hope to show you tomorrow that not only are miracles possible, but the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and even atheists are admitting the evidence for it. We'll see that tomorrow. Then we're going to get to the key question, is the New Testament true? The New Testament doesn't have a prayer if there's no truth, no God, or no miracles. But if truth exists, if God exists, if miracles are possible, then we're going to look at the New Testament documents to see if they're historically reliable enough to let us know if one particular event from the ancient world took place. What event would that be? The resurrection. Did Jesus really rise from the dead? Because look, if Jesus rose from the dead, game over, Christianity's true. Of course, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, game over, it's false. You might as well sleep in on Sunday and do what you want the rest of the week, because if Jesus hasn't risen from the dead, as Paul himself wrote to the church at Corinth, your faith's in vain. Do you realize Christianity is a religious worldview that you can investigate and see if it's really true? It's not just somebody's philosophy or somebody's fantasy. You can look into this and see if it's really true, and we're going to do that. Now, from that point, if the resurrection did occur, then you can draw some conclusions to the point where you can say the Bible's the Word of God. You say, why? Because look, if Jesus predicted and accomplished his own resurrection from the dead, then he's God. And whatever God teaches is true. Jesus taught the entire Old Testament as the Word of God, and he promised the New Testament. You say, why trust Jesus? Look, I just have a personal policy. If somebody predicts and accomplishes his own resurrection from the dead, I just trust whatever the guy says. All right? So this is our overall outline. But you might be thinking, wait a minute, Frank, aren't we supposed to just have faith? I mean, why do you get evidence? If you get evidence, you're taken away from faith. Is that true? No, it's not true at all. In fact, we're going to explain here in a few minutes that you really need evidence if you're going to be a Christian because, as we said in that little promo video, the Bible on many occasions talks about getting evidence. In fact, one of the verses that I mentioned in that little promo video is this from 1 Peter 3:15, where Peter says, always be ready to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. Now, the gentleness and respect thing is hard for me because I'm originally from New Jersey. All right? You guys, who's here from Jersey? Forget about it. What exit? 13? 8? This is Turnpike. Give me Parkway. What exit? 6, 4, 100B, okay? The Jersey Shore. Forget about it. All right? All right, so what we're going to do, I live in Charlotte now, Charlotte, North Carolina, but I don't have a North Carolina accent. If I had a North Carolina accent, everyone would be saved. Why? Because Billy Graham, Billy Graham had the North Carolina accent. That's why everybody was saved. I told Franklin to come over. If you could talk like that all the time, everybody would be saved. All right. So you got to get evidence for what you believe. So we're going to do that, and we're going to start right here at point 1. Does truth exist? You guys ready to go? Yeah. You are called to rise, so arise. Let's go. You guys ready to go? Yeah. All right. All right. Whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson. Right? Because Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, Colonel, I want the truth. And Nicholson said, you can't handle the truth. Arise, church. If he said it that way, the movie would have gone nowhere. You can't handle the truth. That's not how he said it. Here's how he said it.
I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
All right, let's try it again. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Now that felt better, didn't it? Didn't you always want to come to church and yell at the pastor, you can't handle the truth? It would feel so good, wouldn't it? Well, there's a lot of people that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative. Well, look, if you don't get anything outside of what we talk about here tonight, even if you're an atheist here tonight, thank you for coming, but if you don't get anything outside of what we talk about tonight, even if you're an atheist, Christian, anywhere in between, this is going to be helpful. Why? Because what we're going to talk about tonight, I think, is the most important thinking skill that I've ever learned. And this thinking skill I didn't even know. I already had a master's degree. I was 33 years old, and I didn't know what I'm about to show you now, to show you what a dimwit I was. And all it is basic logic. It's just applying the law of non-contradiction, one of the fundamental laws of logic. If you can apply the law of non-contradiction, half of what you need to know, you'll already know to defend the Christian faith. Why? Because this thinking skill will help you discover what is false. Why is that important? Because half the battle is avoiding ideas that are false. If you can say, well, these are false, then you can concentrate on what is true. If you're deceived and you start believing things that are false, you're ultimately going to smack up against reality and it's going to hurt. Okay? So this thinking skill is critically important. And the easiest way of showing you this thinking skill is to give you an example of using it. Suppose someone were to come up to you and say, there is no truth. You should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Yeah, if somebody says there is no truth, someone from Jersey over here, I could tell the way they said it, Hey, is that true? Yeah, that's what you want to say. If somebody says there is no truth, you say, hey, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth? Because if it's true that there's no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? Can everybody see that this is a self-defeating statement? What's a self-defeating statement? A self-defeating statement violates the law of non-contradiction, which says that opposite ideas cannot both be true at the same time and in the same sense. This is like saying I can't speak a word in English, right? If I were to say I can't speak a word in English, what would you say? Yeah, you just use English to say it. It's self-defeating. It doesn't meet its own standard. It would be like if I said my parents had no kids that lived. Or my brother is an only child. Or everything I say is a lie. Some of you will get that tomorrow. Or all generalizations are false. Some of you will never get that one, right? These are all self-defeating statements, and you've got to get good at recognizing self-defeating statements because you want to avoid what is false. So here's how you do it. This is the thinking skill. What you do is you turn the claim on itself. Turn the claim on itself. So if someone says there's no truth, you turn the claim on itself and simply ask, is that true? All right, so let's do a few more of these. There's a lot of these in our culture. How about if someone were to say to you, there's no such thing as absolute truth? Yeah, you turn the claim on itself and you're going to say, hey, isn't that an absolute truth? Or you might want to say, are you absolutely sure? Right? You see, this claim right here is an absolute truth, claiming there are no such things as absolute truths. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. So turn the claim on itself. Now, sometimes it isn't said this way, sometimes it's said this way. All truth is relative. Probably heard people say that. All truth is relative. If somebody says all truth is relative, if you turn the claim on itself, what question are you going to ask back? Yeah, is that a relative truth? Notice you don't have to be unkind. You're simply asking a question back. Is that a relative truth? And see what they say. Because this is an absolute truth again, claiming all truth is relative. Now, in our culture, it's not said this way much anymore. You know, this is the way it's said more now. There isn't the truth, only my truth, right? I have my truth, you have your truth, you live your truth, I'll live my truth, we'll all get along. Right? It sounds so right, doesn't it? It sounds so Oprah, right? It's like everybody ought to agree with this, right? We each have our own truth. Let's just live our own truth. Everyone will be happy. There's just one big problem with it. If someone were to say there isn't the truth, only my truth, what question should you ask them? Yeah. If somebody says there isn't the truth, only my truth, you want to ask them, is that just your truth or the truth? Because if this claim up here is just your truth, it's not the truth, it's just your opinion, okay, well, why should I believe it then? It's just an opinion. But if you're saying this is the truth up here, this statement says there aren't any the truths. Do you see that this is a the truth statement saying there are no the truths? Yep. This is like saying I can't speak a word in English. Now, I know it's not popular to say this in our culture, but there's no such thing as my truth or your truth. There's just the truth. I mean, if you're going to say you have your own truth, you might as well say, I have my own math. I mean, imagine, say, Pastor Brent asked me to work at his house or something. He says, Frank, come over to my house. I got some things for you to do. And I say, great, and I do them. And he says, I'm going to pay you $10 an hour. Just tell me how many hours you work, and tell me, and then I'll pay you. Now, actually, Pastor Brent would never do this. He doesn't pay that much. But suppose I say, Brent, I worked for 15 hours at $10 an hour. You owe me $150,000. And he goes, what? I don't owe you $150,000. I owe you $150,000. And I go, oh, no, you don't understand. I have my own math. Right? What's he going to say? You don't have your own math. You don't have your own truth. Math is math. Truth is truth, whether you like it or not. And if you claim that's not the truth, you're using the truth to try and say that. Right. You see the point? It's completely self-defeating. Now, sometimes it isn't said this way, sometimes it's said this way. It's true for you, but not for me. You've probably heard people say that. Well, Buddhism's true for you, and Christianity's true for somebody else, and you have your own truth, I have my truth. That's true for you, but this is true for me. What do you say to that? What do you say to somebody who says it's true for you, but not for me? This is also self-defeating. It's just a little bit more subtle. If somebody says it's true for you but not for me, say, hey, is that true for everybody? Is true for you but not for me true for everybody? Because if true for you but not for me is true for everybody, then true for you but not for me can't be true because it's true for everybody. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough. But that's because it's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Actually, there's a more fun way of dealing with this. If somebody says it's true for you but not for me, say, sure, go try that with your bank teller. Yeah, go to your bank teller and say, look, the economy's down, gas prices are up, everything is up. I need some extra money. I'd like $100,000 out of my account. Bank teller looks at your account and says, I'm sorry, I only have $6.14 in your account. It's easy to get the money. You simply say, that's true for you but not for me. Give me the $100,000. Are you going to get the money? No, if it's true there was only $6.14 in your account, that's true for all people at all times in all places when referring to your account at that time. That's just the way it is. Or let's say you're going down Highway 4, you're on your way to Lakeland. You're going 100 miles an hour. A cop sees you, pulls you over, walks up to your car. You put the glass down. He goes, you're going 100. And you go, that's true for you but not for me. And you speed away. Can't give you a ticket if it's not true for you. No! If you were going 100, that's true for all people at all times in all places when we're referring to you at that time. It's just true. Same thing is true with regard to Christianity. If Jesus really did rise from the dead, if he really is God, that's true for all people at all times in all places, whether you believe it or not. By the way, it's also not true if he didn't rise from the dead. You can believe it all you want. If he didn't rise from the dead, your faith's in vain. I go to a lot of churches. I normally ask people, hey, do you think Christianity's true? Most people will say yes, and then I'll ask them why. You know what answer I get more than any other? Because I have faith. Is that a good answer? Does your faith change whether or not something's true? Does your faith change whether or not God exists or Jesus rose from the dead? No, your faith doesn't change a thing about those things. I mean, do you have to believe something to make it true? Do you have to believe in gravity to stay on the ground? Do people who don't believe in gravity float away? Hey, look, there's another one. Hey, if you believe, you'll come back. No, that's not the way it works. You say, well, why is the Bible always talking about faith then? Because there's two kinds of faith. This is a very important distinction. There's belief that, and then there's belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the Bible's telling the truth. That's what we call apologetics. Again, we're not saying we're sorry, we're giving evidence for what we believe. But all the belief that in the world won't get your moral transgressions forgiven. For that, you got to go from belief that to belief in. You see, belief that is just of the head. Belief in is not only of the head, but of the heart. In fact, James, the half-brother of Jesus, who wrote that little book in the New Testament called, you guys are sharp tonight. James says, even the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble. Do you know that if God exists, and he does, and if demons exist, and they do, they know that God exists better than we do, right? They're in the spiritual realm. But they don't trust in him. Why? They don't want to trust in him. There's a difference between belief that and belief in. You can know something's true, but still not assent to it. And by the way, we know this in relationships, don't we? In fact, when I first met my wife 37 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife, but all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. That's the difference between belief that and belief in. I mean, young ladies, if you're dating a man and you'd like this man to marry you, suppose he were to say to you, you know, you would make a great wife. I believe that you would make a great wife. Is that enough? What are you going to do if he says that? I believe that you would make a great wife. You're going to go, is that it? You believe that I'll make a great wife? So? How about you trust in me and ask me? There's a difference, isn't there? There's a lot of people that could make a great wife. But who are you going to ask? the difference between belief that and belief in. Now, if Christianity is true, and it is, you can know that and still not trust in Jesus. And you don't have to trust in Jesus. Why? If you don't want to trust in Jesus, he's not going to force you into heaven against your will. You know, if you don't want him now, you're not going to want him in eternity. Now, most of the time when the Bible's talking about faith, it's talking about the second kind. It's talking about trusting in. After you know that it's true, trust in Jesus to be your Savior. But faith does not mean you have no evidence. The biblical definition of faith is trusting in what you have good evidence to believe is true. Trusting in what you have good evidence to believe is true. Now, if you go to college, you're probably going to hear this when you go. There's no truth in anything but science. What's the problem with that claim? Turn the claim on itself. What question are you going to ask back?
Is that science?
Yeah, you're still going to say, hey, is that a scientific truth? Can you go in the laboratory and prove that? No, that's a philosophical claim. You can't prove that in the laboratory. That's a statement about science. That's not even a scientific statement. And by the way, you can't do science without philosophy. Science is built on philosophy. In fact, you can't read the Bible without philosophy. You can't read the news. You guys don't know what a newspaper is. You can't read the internet without philosophy. Philosophy undergirds everything we do. What's philosophy? Right thinking about reality. When you get a PhD, what does a PH stand for? No, it's not phenomenally dumb. What does it stand for? Philosophy of physics, philosophy of biology, philosophy of history, whatever. It grounds everything we do. In fact, we have a book called Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. And in the book, there's a chapter on science. And here's the title of the chapter. Science doesn't say anything. Scientists do. Why do I say that? Because all data needs to be gathered, and then all data needs to be interpreted. And who does that? Scientists do that. And sometimes scientists get it wrong. In fact, you ever wonder why you've gotten conflicting advice on COVID for 2.5 years? People say, well, follow the science. Which science? Who? I mean, look, if scientists have good data and they interpret it properly, you're going to get good advice. If they have good data but they don't interpret it properly, you're going to get bad advice. If they have bad data, it doesn't matter how they interpret it, you're going to get bad advice. If there's a political agenda, no, that'll never happen. Are you kidding me? Why do we think that scientists are immune to the same 3 temptations the rest of us are not immune to? What are the 3 temptations that can derail any of us? Sex, money, and power. Those are the 3 things that people will bend the truth for. In fact, sex, money, and power are good things, but they're so good, we'll often take shortcuts to get them. Those are the 3 temptations we got to worry about in ourselves and in other people. Scientists can be tempted to bend the data or bend their interpretation for sex, money, or power. I think in this case, a lot of it has to do with money, and a lot of it has to do with power. Same thing is true when it comes to the creation-evolution debate. Everyone's looking at the same evidence. Did we evolve or were we created? Everyone's looking at the same evidence. And there's only 2 ways to interpret the evidence. You can say that this evidence happened by natural means, or you could say this happened by intelligent means, some kind of intelligent cause. Here's the problem. If you're an atheist, you've already ruled out intelligent causes before you even look at the evidence. So what's the only game in town then? It's got to be a natural cause. Doesn't matter how much the evidence is going, oh, no, it looks like it's intelligence. And we'll see some of this tomorrow. They've already ruled that out philosophically. So the only game in town, it's got to be a natural cause. That's how we got here. It's got to be natural. It's got to be some sort of evolutionary process. Now, is that a result of the science or is that a result of the philosophy? It's a result of the philosophy. They've already ruled out the only other option. And by the way, while science is important, in fact, it's so important, we couldn't even have this church 100 years ago Why? Because we didn't have air conditioning back then, right? None of us would be sitting here. We wouldn't have all this audio-visual stuff without science, right? So it's made our lives a lot more comfortable and a lot more fun in many ways. But science is not the most important thing in the world. In fact, the most important things in the world have nothing to do with science. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. Why? I don't know. Let's run an experiment. No! How about this? You've probably heard people say this. You should doubt everything. Somebody says that, you turn the claim on itself. This is a skeptical claim. What are you going to say back? Hey, should I doubt that? Why are skeptics skeptical of everything but skepticism? You ever notice that? They don't doubt that. Now, let me ask you guys a question. How many people in here, regardless of what you believe, could be an atheist, Christian, anywhere in between, how many people in here sometimes doubt that what you believe about God is true? Look, if you don't have your hand up right now, you're probably not thinking very much, okay? I mean, I've written books on this stuff, and sometimes I wake up in the morning, I go, I don't even know if this is true. You ever do that? But then I start thinking about my doubts, and I realize that my doubts are more emotional than they are intellectual. In other words, the evidence for Christianity is really good. If I'm having a good day, everything's fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. What's changing, me or the evidence? Yeah, the evidence hasn't changed. It's me. I'm going up and down. In fact, my friend Greg Kokel, who wrote a great book called Tactics, you ought to get, said, he's a Christian, he says, before I have my first cup of coffee in the morning, I'm an atheist. After I have my first cup, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. By the time I have my second cup, I'm back to being a Christian again. Now, what's changing, him or the evidence? Right? He's going up and down. Do you realize that your psychology is not going to tell you the truth of something outside your skull if you don't follow the evidence? Your psychology isn't the answer. The evidence is the answer. Let me give you an illustration of this. There are some people who cannot get on an airplane. They're terrified to get on an airplane, even though the evidence shows it's the safest way to get anywhere. It's safer to get to that side of the room in an airplane than it is to walk there. All right? Think about the thousands and thousands and thousands of flights every day. No incidents. Very rarely do we have a crash. It's so supremely safe. You ought to be more afraid to drive in your car, and yet you drive in your car every day. Why? You're allowing your psychology to overcome the evidence. The evidence says this is true, and you're saying my psychology says this is true. Don't allow your psychology to overcome the truth about eternity, because there's nothing more important than eternity, than the truth about God. If you concentrate on the evidence, regardless of what your psychology is, and by the way, you know your psychology can change with the weather. It probably does. That's why a lot of you live here, right? You don't want to be cold and gray and clammy, and it depresses you, right? Don't let your psychology can change with what you ate last night, right? Don't let your psychology overpower the evidence. I think when you begin to look at the evidence, you're going to realize that Christianity is true. And then you can start doubting your doubts. And if you start doubting your doubts, then you're back to knowing something for sure. Have you guys ever thought about doubting your doubts? I doubt it. Oh, how about this one? You hear this a lot. You ought not judge. And you Christians, you ought not judge because Jesus said don't judge. Stop judging, you hypocrites. All right, before we get to Jesus, what's the problem logically with the claim? Yeah, if somebody says you ought not judge, you're going to say, hey, isn't that a judgment? Or if they say you ought not judge, put your hands on your hips and say, then why are you judging me for judging? Notice it's a judgment to say there are no judgments, or to say that you ought not judge. Now you might be saying, wait a minute, Frank, didn't Jesus say don't judge? Nope, never said it. Sure he did. He said it in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. It's right there in the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, I know it's going to sound weird, but it's true. There are no verses in the Bible. There are no verses in the Bible. Do you think when Matthew was writing his biography of Jesus, which we call a gospel, he said, here's chapter 7, verse 1? No. When were those chapter and verse divisions added? about 500 years ago to help us navigate the text. They're not in the original, which is a good thing. Why? It would be really hard to find your way around this big book without numbers. I mean, imagine if you had no numbers in your Bible and Pastor Brent got up one Sunday and he said, all right, let's go about 2/3 of the way in. Let's see if we can find the same spot, right? No, you wouldn't be able to do that, right? You've got to have numbers. The problem is we tend to think if it's got a number in front of it, we can take that number or take that verse out and make it say whatever we want. This is why, by the way, some of you are going to be really mad at me for this, but that's okay. I leave Sunday, okay? This is why Jeremiah 29:11 does not apply to you today. Preach it. Another guy from Jersey. What's Jeremiah 29:11? You know, the passage says, oh, the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, plans to make you whole, plans to give you a future. I mean, this is on coffee mugs, this is on pillows, this is in needlepoint that people put on their wall, this is on birthday cards, right? Oh, the plans I have for you. Has nothing to do with Christianity. It's not a promise to us. Who's it a promise to? It's a promise to the exiles in 586 BC who went to Iraq under Nebuchadnezzar. So unless you're 2,600 years old living in modern day Iraq under Nebuchadnezzar, this is not a promise to you. And by the way, it's a promise that would come true 70 years later. So it doesn't have anything to do with Christians today other than to show us what God did for his people back then. It's not a promise to us. That's all I'm saying. I always wonder when people quote Jeremiah 29:11, why don't they quote Jeremiah 44:11? What's in Jeremiah 44:11? Jeremiah 44:11 is what God told the exiles who went to Egypt instead of Babylon. And he warned them, don't go to Egypt. You know what Jeremiah 44:11 says? I will destroy you in all Judah. You don't see that stitched into a pillow, right? You don't see that on a birthday card, happy birthday. I will destroy you in all Judah. Well, thank you, Grandma. That is so sweet. No, because when people take stuff out of context, they're not getting God's word, they're getting their own. Now let's go back to Matthew 7 for a minute. Does Jesus just say, judge not, and he stops right there? No, what does he say? He says, judge not, lest you be judged by the same standard you judge others, you be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the log out of your own eye first, you hypocrite. Notice that's a judgment, you hypocrite. He says, then after you take the log out of your own eye, you'll be better able to help your brother. Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. That involves making a judgment. He's simply saying, get that problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. So this is not a command not to judge. It's actually a command on how to judge. Don't judge hypocritically. If you've got that problem, fix it, then go help your brother. But it would be completely ridiculous to say don't make judgments. Why? Number one, it's a judgment itself. Number two, you'd be dead already if you didn't make judgments. You made 100 judgments today just getting over here, right? Good choices from bad choices, safe choices from dangerous choices. And now you're thinking, this was really a bad judgment. This guy's kind of crazy, okay? Atheists make judgments. What judgments do they make? Well, there's no God. Jesus didn't rise from the dead. The Bible's not telling the truth. There is no meaning to life. When you die, you're just going to become worm food. It's hopeless. Have a nice day. These are all judgments, right? The question isn't whether or not you can make judgments. The question is, are your judgments true? In fact, Jesus even says in John 7:24, he says, stop judging by mere appearances and make a right judgment. You have to make judgments. You have to judge whether or not you're a Christian or not. I will say this, though. Jesus did save a very stern rebuke for people who were judgmental. And who were the judgmental ones in his day? Pharisees. Who were the Pharisees? What was their job? What did they do? The Pharisees were the religious and political leaders of Israel. Many of them were on the Sanhedrin, the governing council to whom Rome delegated much of the day-to-day legal authority to. In other words, these people were politicians, and Jesus went after them. Are you telling me Jesus got involved in politics? Oh, yes! And he wasn't so nice doing it. In fact, if you think Jesus was a sweet guy who's never said a bad word about anyone, you have not read John chapter 2, John chapter 8, or Matthew chapter 23. What happens in John chapter 2? Jesus makes a whip and he goes and he jacks people up in the temple. Sweet and gentle Jesus did this? Yes! And then in John chapter 8, he's having an argument with these Pharisees, these religious political leaders. He's right in the middle of the argument and he says, your father is the devil. Jesus, you can't say that. That's not very Christ-like. Excuse me, I am Christ. Can you imagine you're having an argument with somebody and you stop right in the middle and you go, your father is the devil. Never try that with a sibling, by the way. And then in Matthew 23, Jesus says, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs, but on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, and then once you make him a convert, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? What? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes. Jesus was not Barney. Can't we all get along, boys and girls? No! I came to bring a sword. It's going to divide mother and daughter, father and son. How often do you hear that preached? He was not Mr. Rogers. I mean, he was kind most of the time, but he certainly didn't go around saying, this sermon brought to you by the letter E. No, Jesus was tough. In fact, why did they kill him? Number one, because he claimed to be God. And claiming to be God, that was blasphemy to the Jews and sedition to the Romans. And number two, he was a threat. He was a threat to those people, particularly the temple authorities. I think Caiaphas knew Jesus was the Messiah. Why? Because Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, as recorded in John chapter 11. What does Caiaphas say right after that in John chapter 12 about Jesus? It's better that one innocent man die than the whole nation perish. He knew he had risen him from the dead, and yet he wants to kill him. Why? To keep his job. Sex, money, power. He wanted to keep his job. By the way, I've noticed one other thing about judging. You ever notice that when you compliment somebody, which is a judgment, nobody gets upset? You know, if you say to your best friend, I really love you, you're such a wonderful person, I wish I could be like you, you think your friend's going to say, well, who are you to judge? Right? You're never going to say that, right? I've noticed that people don't have a problem with judging, they just have a problem with judgments they don't like. In fact, if you tell somebody something that's true and they get mad at you, you just helped convict them. As Augustine said, we love the truth when it enlightens us. We hate the truth when it convicts us. For you military people in here, and by the way, I was in the Navy for 8 years, which stands for never again volunteer yourself. For you military people in here, you always get more flack when you're over the target. In other words, if you tell somebody something that's true and they're shooting back at you, you're over the target. They don't want their evil deeds exposed. As Jesus said, men love darkness rather than light. So everybody's making judgments. The question is, are you being judgmental? Are you judging by mere appearances? As Jesus said, don't do that. In fact, somebody put it this way, evangelism is just one beggar showing another beggar where the food is. None of us are making it without Jesus. So we all have to make judgments. We just have to make judgments without being judgmental. Now, there's many more of these self-defeating statements we could go through. We don't have time. We're running out of time here. I just want to summarize it this way. Can everybody see that this statement right here shoots itself? Can everybody see that? And all the other statements we went through, you know, all truth is relative, there are no absolutes, it's true for you but not for me, there's no the truth, only my truth, all truth comes from science, you should doubt everything, you ought not judge. They're all equally self-defeating, which means they're false. So you can avoid all that and concentrate on what is true. You want to concentrate on what is true. So you know what this means? Relativism and postmodernism, which are the dominant views in our university system and now even in our high schools. Thank God parents are starting to stand up against this. Relativism and postmodernism are false because they claim it's true that there's no truth. Meanwhile, they're uttering all these truth claims. What they think are truth claims. Now, we do this a lot on college campuses. In fact, there's some people here from University of Southern Florida. Where are they? Oh, they are right over there. Maybe we'll go to Southern Florida next. This is actually a picture from the question line at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Hey, quit badgering me. The University of Wisconsin at Madison loves the Bible about as much as the University of California at Berkeley does, okay? So when you go there, you're going to get some hostility from the Q&A line. And whenever I get any hostility at a college campus, I'll normally stop and ask the atheist this question. And I recommend you ask this question of anybody who's not a Christian. Here's the question. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I've had atheists stand at that microphone in front of hundreds of people and say, no. No? How's that reasonable? How's that rational? I mean, you claim to be a beacon of reason. I ask you if something were true, would you believe it? And you say no? That's not reasonable. Yeah, it's not reasonable. The problem isn't in the head. The problem's in the heart. They don't want it to be true. They don't want there to be a God. Why? Because they want to be God of their own lives. They're not on a truth quest. They're on a happiness quest. They're just going to believe whatever they think is going to make them happy. Here's the problem. You can make yourself happy over the short term doing a lot of fun things, but over the long term, it's a disaster. And everyone in this room over 40 years old knows what I'm talking about because many of us have tried it ourselves, right? I'm going to do it my way. Yeah, not very long you're not. You're going to run out of runway pretty quick. No, the only way to get true contentment is to go straight through truth, and Jesus is the truth. So always ask people, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? If they hesitate or say no, the problem isn't in the head, the problem's in the heart. What can you do for that kind of person? Pray for them, love them, and by the way, love does not mean approval. That's right. We'll talk about this tomorrow. You truly love people, you'll tell them the truth, even if they won't like you for it. Love them, plant seeds, and then chances are there's going to be a tragedy in that person's life because we all face tragedy at some point. And if that person ever is open, at that point, that'll be the point they're open. Your phone's going to ring and that person's going to be on the other end. Why? Because you're a person of spiritual depth. They're not going to call their atheist friend when something goes bad. What's the atheist going to say? Well, there's no rhyme or reason to any of this. There's no meaning to life. They're going to call you. When the student's ready, the teacher will appear. In fact, let me ask you this. Let me just do a little survey here before we go. We just got a few more minutes. I want you, everyone in here, if you're a Christian, this is just for the Christians. If you're a Christian, I want to ask you to think about somebody you know who is not a Christian, whom you'd like to be a Christian. A friend, relative, somebody like that, right? Everybody got someone? Yeah. All right, don't point at him. All right, here's the question. Is the person you're thinking of on a relentless pursuit of truth? They want to know if Christianity's true. Or are they apathetic or maybe even hostile to Christianity? All right, how many people in here say the person I'm thinking of is on a relentless pursuit of truth? They want to know if Christianity's true. Crickets. All right, how many people say the person I'm thinking of is apathetic or hostile? Yeah, look around the room. It's everybody. I've noticed that most people are looking for God like a criminal's looking for a cop. They're not interested. So don't argue with them on social media why they keep moving the goalposts. Just stop and say, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And see what they say. Again, if they hesitate or say no, it's not a head problem, it's a heart problem. They're not interested. You know what this shows me? That God is eminently fair. Why? Because he's given enough evidence that he's out there, but a lot of people don't want him. They're running from him. They don't want God. They want to go their own way. So don't beat your head against the wall trying to talk somebody into it if they're not open. Ask them, if it were true, would you become a Christian? If they say yes, then say, great. Let's get some evidence. In fact, it is true that truth exists. Self-defeating to say it doesn't. Tomorrow we're going to point out that God does exist. We're going to get into that, and then our miracles possible is the New Testament true. But if you can't come back tomorrow and you want to get into this a little bit more deeply, the book is available on the book table as well as a DVD set that goes through this in 12 points actually. And it's probably about 7 hours long, the whole thing. There's a new book out there called Hollywood Heroes, How Your Favorite Movies Reveal God. We've gone through, my son and I, who's also a seminary grad, we've gone through some of the biggest blockbusters of Hollywood over the past 40 years, the ones that made like the most money. Things like Captain America, Iron Man, Harry Potter. Harry Potter? Yeah, you'd be surprised. Lord of the Rings, Batman, Wonder Woman, Star Wars. And when you look at all these movies, you know what they all do? They all borrow from the greatest story ever told. And you can teach apologetics, theology, and life lessons by reading about these movies. That's what that book is about. It's a brand new book. And by the way, all the proceeds from the sale of the books and the DVDs will go to feed needy children. Mine. Okay? Just so you know. All right? Now, here's what I want you to do. You don't have to get a book to do this, but if you text the word evidence to this phone number, 855-909-0582, we'll put you on a mailing list that you can never get off of. No, that's, that's not what we're doing here. I'm going to send you the entire PowerPoint presentation for I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist in a PDF format. Over the next 2 days, today and tomorrow, I'll probably show you about, 80 slides or so. The whole PowerPoint presentation is 362 slides. Okay, so you can look at it at your leisure if you want to see the whole thing. We don't have time to go through the whole thing. We're just skimming the surface, okay? But if you would text the word evidence to that phone number, 855-909-0582, then you'll get the whole thing and you can look at it at your leisure. But tomorrow morning, we're going to come back at 9 and we are going to do Does God Exist? Are Miracles Possible? And is the New Testament true? Don't go anywhere because Pastor Ken's going to come up here right now and close this out. I don't know, do we have any time for questions or do we? Let's do a couple questions, Pastor Ken. Anyone having a question? No one likes to ask the first question. Let's move right on to the second question. Second question. You got... Have we updated the book to become more current date-wise?
2012 versus 2022.
We have not updated it yet. We may update it at the 20th anniversary, which is in a couple of years. Yeah, it's been out since 2004. But it's really evergreen. There's not a lot of new data since 2004. There's a couple of nuanced things, but not a lot of new stuff, actually. Anyone else? Right over here. Yes, ma'am.
What do you say when someone tells you he doesn't think Jesus is coming back?
What do you say when somebody says he doesn't think Jesus is coming back? When somebody says something, it's not your job to refute what they say, it's that person's job to support what they say. So you should ask the person, what do you mean by that, and how did you come to that conclusion? Why do you think that's really true? That you don't think, why would you conclude that Jesus is not coming back? I would just ask him to see what he says, see what evidence he has for that, okay? Because look, if Jesus really did rise from the dead, then I'm trusting whatever he said. And he told us that he's going to come like a thief in the night. Nobody knows the day, the hour, the times, nor the seasons. And I think that's for a reason. Why? Because if we knew Jesus was coming back next Tuesday, it would change our behavior.
Monday.
Yeah, maybe on Monday, right? We'd live it up till Monday and then we go, oh, Jesus. No, this is why I think the end times are purposefully a little vague. Because if they were too clear, that would change our behavior negatively. In fact, Paul even says that about the Old Testament prophecies pointing to Jesus. He says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. He says, if the rulers of this world knew who Jesus was, they never would have crucified the Lord of glory. You can look back on the Old Testament after you know Jesus has come and go, man, how did I miss Isaiah 53? How did I miss Daniel 9? How did I miss Micah 5:2? How did I miss Malachi 3:1? How did I miss all these passages that pointed to Jesus coming? Because they're scattered all over the Old Testament for a reason, so nobody got the big picture until he came. And then you go, oh. But if they had known he was coming, would they have killed him? No, because then Satan wouldn't have been defeated. All right. Yes, sir, go ahead. Or yes, ma'am, either one.
Okay. Yeah, so on the college campus, there's a lot of Jewish students.
Yes.
I know that they said, how do you navigate, like, because it can be really tempting to just play really nice, you know, because you're like, oh, I don't want to, you know, go into the Jewish stuff too much or the Muslim stuff, but I guess do you have any resources or advice for how do you navigate pushing against like the truth of Islam or Judaism in like a day-to-day sense without you can't always do a conference, but you can have conversations?
Okay, so yeah, so the question is, if you're in an environment, you're talking about a college campus? Yeah, you're in an environment where there's Jewish people and Muslim people, and of course atheists as well. How do you do that without being too aggressive? And I think the way to do it is just ask questions. Why do you think Judaism's true? Right? Why do you think Islam is true? And listen to the other person's story and see why they think it's the case. And just keep asking questions. Look, it's easy to ask questions, it's hard to answer them. You don't even have to know anything to ask questions, right? You can just go, well, why do you believe that? And why do you believe that? And before somebody is going to start believing your worldview, they got to begin to start doubting their worldview, right? So you just got to keep asking them, why do you think that's true? Like, for example, with regard to Islam, Muslims would agree with the first 3 points. What they're going to disagree with is the New Testament being reliable. So my question to a Muslim is going to be, well, why do you think the New Testament's not reliable? And they may give some, well, it's been corrupted. Then what I'm going to say to them is, well, have you ever read Surah 568, which is a verse in the Quran? Surah is a chapter. Surah 568 says, O ye people of the book, those are the Christians and the Jews, you have nothing to stand on except what you find in the Torah and the Gospels. In other words, you ought to believe the Torah and the Gospels. So if the Bible has been corrupted, why is Muhammad getting a revelation that says Christians and Jews ought to obey it? And I'm just going to ask them, the Quran is telling us to obey the Bible, and yet you're saying that the Bible's been corrupted. So either way, that would mean that the Quran is not the Word of God. Because if the Bible isn't true, yet the Quran is telling us to believe it, then the Quran is wrong. If the Bible is true, and the Quran is telling us to believe it, at least the Quran is right on that. But other places, the Quran disagrees with the New Testament. Like it says Jesus never died, Surah 4, verse 157. He was taken straight to heaven. So either way, the Quran is in trouble. So I would just ask them questions about that and see what they say. But that's a good question. We ought to find out what people believe and keep asking them why. Let me just give you a couple of tips on this, because this is really important. And this is in our app, the Cross-Examined app, 2 words in the App Store. There are 3 questions you ought to ask anybody who makes a statement that you don't agree with. The first question is, what do you mean by that? The second question is, how did you come to that conclusion, or what evidence do you have for that position? And then the third question is, have you ever considered, and this is your opportunity to provide some counter evidence to what they believe. Let me give you an example of this. Sometimes you'll get people who say, well, I can't believe the Bible because it's been changed throughout the centuries. Now, if you're like me, I want to jump in and say and show them why it's not been changed throughout the centuries, but that's not what you ought to do. What you ought to say is, what do you mean it's been changed throughout the centuries? See what they think, right? See what evidence they have for this. The next question is, how did you come to that conclusion? In other words, what evidence do you have for that position? If you want to customize, how did you come to that conclusion? You might say, have you studied the manuscript evidence for yourself? I guarantee you the person you're talking to is not going to say, well, yeah, just last night I was up reading a book about the Byzantine line of manuscripts. No. You see, most people don't have evidence for their worldview. They just heard a slogan. And they like the slogan. And as soon as you try and challenge them to give you evidence for the truth of the slogan, they can't because they don't have evidence for it. So always ask them, what evidence do you have for that? Then the third question is, have you ever considered, we know the Bible has not been changed throughout the centuries because we have almost 6,000 handwritten Greek manuscripts as small as fragments from the early 2nd century all the way through the printing press. And when we compare all those and then compare them to the early church father quotations, we know what the original New Testament said within a 99.5% accuracy. So their whole objection goes out the window. By the way, these 3 questions, ladies and gentlemen, you can use for anything, not just questions about Christianity. Like, for example, if parents, if your son calls you one night and says, hey, Dad, I'm not going to be home by 11 like you want me to. Don't panic. Just say, what do you mean by that? Second question, how'd you come to that conclusion? Third question, have you ever considered if you're not home by 11, you're grounded for 2 weeks? Be right home, Dad, right? Now, warning, husbands, never ever use these questions on your wives, okay? Because if your wife calls you an idiot, don't say, what do you mean by that, right? How'd you come to that conclusion? Because if I asked that of my wife, she'd have a list 37 years long, all right?
Thank you so much for watching the message. We hope that this message has literally left you feeling inspired and encouraged to take one more step closer to Jesus. If you haven't subscribed, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Share this on all your platforms of social media. We thank you so much for watching. We will see you next week.